What if I told you that one of the greatest lessons of love and creativity you'll hear today was born from what many would call trash? This is the story of a brave mother who, even without money, without comfort, and facing hard times, discovered a unique way to turn poverty into joy for her children. She picked up cans, bottle caps, wood scraps, and made toys. But not just any toys. She built dreams with her own hands, and in doing so, changed not only the lives of her 4 children, but of an entire community. Get ready. What you're about to hear may deeply move your heart. The house was simple, almost blending in with the scenery around it. Made of old wood, worn down over time by the scorching sun and relentless rain, it stood on the edge of a hillside in the outskirts of a small town in the interior of Minas Gerais. Around it, a dirt yard with few trees and lots of noise coming from neighboring houses. It was a place where life happened by force, with little to work with but an admirable resilience. It was in this setting that Elenice grew up and lived, a woman with a sweet smile and eyes that held a strength hard to explain. She wasn't known for titles, positions, or grand achievements in the outside world. But inside her home, to her 4 children and her husband, she was everything. She was foundation, comfort, solution, and hope. Elenice had a poor childhood, but it was full of affection. From an early age, she learned from her mother, Dona Rosaria, how to reuse everything that came into their hands. "Nothing is trash if you've got imagination," her mother used to say. That phrase stayed in her mind like a seed that would only sprout many years later. Back then, everything was made with care. Corn husk toys, clay pots, rag dolls with button eyes. The lack of money was overcome with creativity. When she met Cláudio, the man who would become her life partner, Elenice already carried the dream of building a big family, full of laughter and love. Cláudio was a calm, hard-working young man with a natural talent for fixing anything, from bikes and fans to old refrigerators. Their connection was instant. They shared the same spirit. Make the best of what you've got. Soon, the children came. First, little Julia was born. Then Vinicius, followed by the twins, Kaique and Luan. The house, already small, became even fuller. But the shouts, the running around, the laughter, and even the crying brought the place to life. Every corner held their marks, drawings on the wall, makeshift toys, and childhood stories being written with humility and love. Financially, however, things were never easy. Cláudio worked as a construction helper with long hours under the hot sun. Elenice cleaned houses in a wealthier neighborhood nearby. The days were exhausting, starting before sunrise and ending when the last child finally fell asleep. But there was never any complaint, just a tireless desire to give the best they could to their children. What hurt Elenice the most wasn't the physical exhaustion, the overdue electric bill, or even the rice carefully measured out at the end of the month. What really weighed on her was seeing her kids longing for what she couldn't give. Julia's curious eyes staring into a toy store window, the sparkle in Vinicius's eyes when he saw a remote control car on TV, Luan's innocent question, asking if Santa would be able to bring a new ball that Christmas. One hot afternoon, while folding clothes, she overheard the boys talking among themselves. "Mom's not going to be able to give us presents this year, right?" asked Kaique quietly. "It's okay though, right? We still have some toys, even if they're broken," Luan replied, trying to sound cheerful. Elenice froze when she heard that. The damp cloth in her hands stopped midair. Her chest tightened, and in that moment, an old, almost forgotten idea came rushing back. She ran to the back of the house, where Cláudio kept tools and boxes of old stuff. She found bottle caps, crushed cans, bits of wood, loose wheels from an old toy car, copper wires, Nothing is trash if you've got imagination. Her mother's voice echoed again in her memory. That night, after everyone was asleep, she stayed up late sorting through the materials. Cláudio woke up to the faint sound of pliers and went to see what was going on. "Love, you okay?" "Yeah," she replied with a tired smile. "I had an idea. I'm going to make toys. With all this, for the kids, so they can have a different kind of Christmas." Cláudio stood in silence for a moment, watching the scene. The woman he loved, sitting on the laundry room floor, surrounded by junk and hope. Without saying a word, he grabbed a toolbox and sat beside her. "Then let me help. You take care of the creativity. I'll handle the screws." And that's how a new mission was born for that couple. Every night after work, they dedicated themselves to the art of turning what nobody wanted into joy for their children. Elenice would design, invent, glue, paint. Cláudio would sand, drill, assemble. They laughed when things went wrong and celebrated like kids when they succeeded in creating something new. They started with the basics: a toy car with bottle cap wheels, tied with string. Then, a doll made from old socks, stuffed with scraps. They also made a little truck out of a milk carton, a kite from a plastic bag, and a yogurt cup telephone. Each toy was a masterpiece of love. Elenice decided to hide the toys until Christmas. She wanted it to be a surprise. She stored them on top of the wardrobe, wrapped in cloth. Every time she finished a new piece, she imagined the smile on each child's face, and that fed her soul, like it was the greatest reward in the world. But it didn't stop there. One day, coming back from a cleaning job, she saw a neighbor sitting on the sidewalk, trying to calm her young son, who was crying because he had lost his only toy. Elenice went inside, grabbed one of the homemade toy cars, and came back. "Here, Donna Marcia, we made this. He can play with it for a while." The neighbor was speechless, and that's how something bigger than she ever imagined began. Children from other houses started showing up, curious, wanting to see the magic toys that Julia's mom makes. Soon, Elenice and Cláudio weren't just making toys for their own kids. They started building them for the neighborhood children too, one by one, with the same care. They used everything they could find: cardboard boxes, toothpaste tubes, wire bits, corks, old fabric. Children who used to play with rocks and sticks now had personalized toys, made with love. And more than that, they began seeing their own parents getting involved in the creation too. What started as a quiet act of love was turning into a chain of affection and creativity throughout the community. Elenice's children gradually realized what their mother was doing. They didn't ask many questions, as if respecting the mystery, but they watched everything with a sense of wonder that needed no words. Julia, the eldest, began helping sew doll dresses. Vinicius wanted to learn how to assemble the car wheels. The twins competed to see who could fly the highest kite made by Cláudio. Elenice watched it all with her heart overflowing. She knew she couldn't give her kids expensive, modern, electronic toys, but she was giving them something far more precious. Memories, stories, feelings, a kind of childhood that stays with you forever. Not in objects, but in emotions. And the most beautiful part was that she didn't do it for recognition. She did it because she truly believed, with all her being, that her children deserved to smile, even in poverty, even with hardships, even with an empty fridge or overdue bills. She was a brave mother, not just because she made toys from scrap, but because she believed that joy could also be built with your own two hands. And in that little wooden house, high on the hill, something much greater than toys was being born. Time went on, and the fame of the toys made by Elenice and Cláudio began to spread beyond the nearby homes. It wasn't anything grand or in the newspapers, just word of mouth. A kid showing off a different toy at school, a mom chatting at the bus stop, an uncle talking at a bar about a woman up on the hill who does magic with trash. And, without realizing it, Elenice was beginning to change not just her family's daily life, but that of an entire community. But the greater the light, the longer the shadow. And life, as always, wouldn't stop testing the strength of that brave mother. That year, the rains came early. October had barely started and the skies were already opening up in heavy downpours every day. The hill where the family lived was known for small landslides. But until then, Elenice's little house had withstood the elements. She already knew the sound the earth made when it began to give way. She had lived through it before. But this year, it was different. It was the middle of the night when Elenice woke up to a sharp crack, almost like thunder. But coming from beneath the house, Cláudio was already up, flashlight in hand. The back wall had cracked. Water was pouring through the gaps in the roof like small waterfalls, and the kitchen floor was soaked. Love. Wake the kids. We have to leave now, said Cláudio, his voice serious. There was no time for questions. Elenice ran to the bedroom, picked up Julia, and urgently called for the boys. In less than 5 minutes, they were all outside, sheltered in a neighbor's garage. Half an hour later, part of the back wall collapsed. The twins' bedroom was destroyed. The scene was devastating. The bed crushed. Toys scattered in the mud. The rag doll Julia had made with her mom now covered in dirt. And in the middle of that chaos, Elenice knelt and cried, but not in despair. She cried with relief. Her children were alive. They were all alive. The house we can rebuild. Them. I couldn't, she whispered, gripping Cláudio's hand tightly. In the days that followed, they stayed at Dona Marcia's house, the same neighbor who had once received a toy car made from bottle caps. Now she returned the favor with mattresses on the floor and hot coffee. The entire community stepped in. Some helped clean the debris. Others brought wood, used roof tiles, leftover cement from construction jobs. Elenice was surprised by it all. She was used to giving, not receiving. But for the first time, she realized that her gesture had planted something much bigger than she ever imagined. People who had barely spoken to her before now offered help with teary eyes. It was one of the first times she felt she wasn't alone. With a lot of effort, they rebuilt the damaged part of the house. Cláudio, his hands sore and blistered from working non-stop, insisted on doing it himself. Elenice returned to her cleaning jobs whenever she could, even with her heart aching from leaving the kids in such a fragile environment. But the challenges didn't stop there. When school resumed, Julia began showing constant fatigue. She'd come home and lie down without even eating. Elenice thought it was just a phase, maybe sadness after everything they'd been through. But one morning, the girl fainted in the kitchen while helping her mother sort scrap materials. The nearest health clinic confirmed what Elenice feared: severe anemia. It wasn't a terrifying diagnosis in itself, but it required a reinforced diet, supplements, and rest, things Elenice could hardly guarantee. The doctor explained gently that this was the result of months, maybe years, of an incomplete diet, lacking essential nutrients. Elenice felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. She blamed herself instantly. If only I'd given her more fruit, more vegetables. If I'd skipped buying paint for the doll and spent the money on food instead. But Cláudio was firm with her. Elenice, you're doing everything you can. You're an incredible mother. Don't carry guilt. Carry courage. That phrase became her silent mantra in the weeks that followed. It was true. She did what she could, and then some. As Julia's anemia began to improve, the house returned to some rhythm. Still fragile, but full of life. That's when another hardship came knocking. And it wasn't a tragedy or an illness. It was a quieter pain, but just as harsh. Her children's shame. Vinicius, the second oldest, started avoiding taking the homemade toys to school. One day, Elenice saw him leaving empty-handed, while the other kids proudly carried their creations. "Son, where's your new toy car?" The one you helped your dad build? Vinicius looked away, embarrassed. The kids at school laughed at me last week. Mom said those are toys for poor kids. Elenice's heart sank, a mix of sadness and helplessness. She knew the outside world didn't see the value in what she and Cláudio made. She knew that, for many, a good toy was only the kind bought in a store, and that hurt more than any physical wound. But instead of scolding him, she took a deep breath and said, "Son, you're right. Maybe it is a toy for poor kids, but it's also a toy for smart people, creative people who don't give up. Whoever laughs at that hasn't yet understood what a real childhood is." That night, she and Cláudio locked themselves in the laundry area and spent hours creating something special, a fully articulated robot made with small boxes, wires, and bottle caps. It was colorful, had an improvised LED light from a watch battery, and even a string controller to move the arms. Elenice went all out. Cláudio added the final touch. He glued a tiny sign to the robot's chest that read, "Made with love and scrap." The next day, Vinicius reluctantly took the robot to school, but he came home in shock. "Mom, the kids loved it. Everyone wanted to see how it worked. The teacher asked me to show it to the whole class. Some even asked if you sell them." Elenice smiled, a shy, tired smile, but full of pride, not for herself, but for seeing her son realize that the value of things isn't in the price. But that recognition didn't solve their financial problems. Bills still piled up on the fridge. The fridge itself was more often empty than full. The toys brought admiration, respect, even affection. But the beans on the plate still depended on house cleaning, on small, odd jobs Cláudio did around the neighborhood, and on the hope that somehow everything would work out. Then, a teacher from the children's school knocked on their door. Dona Vera, an older woman with a firm voice and sharp eyes. She had fallen in love with the toys and made a proposal that left Elenice speechless. "I want to create a project at school to teach children how to make their own toys from recyclable materials. But I need someone with skill, patience, and heart. Would you be willing to lead these workshops?" Elenice was stunned. She'd never taught a class in her life, but Vera insisted. "Doktor, you don't have a diploma, Elenice, but you have something many teachers don't. Lived experience, and a true love for what you do." After a lot of talking, fear, and uncertainty, she agreed. They started on Saturdays, in a borrowed classroom, with just a handful of kids. Cláudio came along, helped with materials, showed the children how to safely use tools. In a few weeks, the project became the pride of the school. Kids wanted to join, teachers praised it, parents spoke proudly, and for the first time, Elenice received a small but steady paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning, a recognition, and also a new possibility. For the first time, she began to see a future beyond survival, a future where what she did, with love, with her hands, with her soul, could also support her family. But the greatest gift was still to come, and when it arrived, it changed everything. Time, always silent and relentless, moved forward, and with it, Elenice's life was being transformed through small details that, to most, might seem almost invisible. But to her, every achievement, no matter how small, was another brick in building a more dignified life for her children. The school project grew. It started with 6 children, then grew to 15. Within a few months, the school board had to open 2 new classes. It wasn't just about playing with scrap, like some skeptical parents thought at first. It was about teaching children something the modern world seemed to have forgotten: the value of creation, of reuse, of patience, of invention. It was about giving meaning to simple things. Elenice, who had never stepped into a classroom as a teacher, was now affectionately called Auntie by dozens of students. Some brought their own ideas, Others asked for help to make toys they saw on TV. And she, with her almost poetic calmness, showed them that anything was possible. They just had to look at things differently. Cláudio remained her right hand. He brought materials, assembled structures, taught the kids how to use tools safely. It was as if their love multiplied there, in every finished toy, in every smile earned. They had little, but they shared a lot. One day, during one of those workshops, a tall man in a dress shirt with sharp eyes appeared in the classroom. He stood silently in the backswa, watching for nearly half an hour without saying a word. Elenice noticed, but continued with her lesson. She was explaining how to build a little airplane out of a toothpaste box and popsicle sticks. The children were mesmerized. At the end, the man approached. "Mrs. Elenice, may I have a quick word?" She nodded, a bit wary. "My name is Fabio. I work with an NGO focused on creative education in low-income communities. I heard about your project from a local teacher and came to see it with my own eyes." Elenice smiled, unsure of what to say. It all felt too big. "Well, I just make toys with the kids. Nothing special," she said, a little embarrassed. "With all due respect, Mrs. Elenice, you're doing much more than that. You're giving them the chance to imagine a different world, and that is revolutionary." The conversation went on. Fabio asked for permission to film a few classes, take photos, and create a short documentary to show the impact of the project. Elenice was hesitant at first, but Cláudio encouraged her. "You deserve to be seen, not for what you have, but for what you do, for who you are." Shortly after Sraf, the video was posted on the NGOs' social media. In just a few days, it went viral. Thousands of people shared the story of the brave mother who, with no money, no academic background, and no government support, was teaching an entire generation to play with awareness and creativity. Elenice began receiving messages from all over Brazil. Teachers asking for tips, mothers in tears, artists in awe. A group of designers from São Paulo offered to help create a manual with instructions for the toys she invented, so other communities could replicate the project. But what touched her most was a message from across the country. It came from a single mother living in a remote community in Pará. She wrote, "Mrs. Elenice, I can't afford toys for my son either, but after watching your video, I made a toy car out of a soapbox with him. He smiled like never before, and I cried. You gave me back the right to be a mother who gives joy, even in poverty." Elenice read that message about 10 times, then looked at Cláudio, eyes filled with tears, and said, "I thought I was just trying to bring joy to mine, but now it feels like I'm reaching other mothers too." As the video gained attention, invitations followed. One, in particular, would take her far from the ground she knew. Fabio came to her with eyes glowing. "Elenice, we've been invited to present the project at the Popular Education Congress in Brasília, and they want you to tell your story there, on stage, with a microphone, in front of an audience." Her eyes widened. She had never even been on a plane, let alone spoken in front of a crowd of educators, scholars, and journalists. But after days of thinking, she agreed. She said yes, not out of pride, but for all the mothers who, like her, needed to believe that the impossible could also be recycled. Cláudio took care of everything. He washed the blouse she would wear, sewed the strap on her old bag, and packed a little handmade toy for her to show at the event. The kids, proud, made drawings and letters for her to take, and when she got there, a new world opened. Elenice, voice trembling, told her story the only way she knew, simply. She spoke about the house on the hill, the collapsed wall, Julia's anemia, Vinicius's shame. But she also spoke about love that endured, about nights spent building toys, about the joy of children, about the day she taught an entire community to see value in what was once discarded. At the end, the auditorium gave a standing ovation. People crying, people shouting, "Bravo!" People asking for selfies with her, as if she were a celebrity. But she didn't get carried away. She knew exactly who she was. A mother, a brave mother. And that, for her, was enough. The impact of the event brought even more rewards. The city council offered her a space to open a community center for sustainable toy making. A small warehouse with tables, cabinets, tools, and recyclable materials. There, she began welcoming even more children. In partnership with public schools and volunteers, Cláudio became the center's coordinator. The kids helped with the workshops. And now, the entire neighborhood looked at that family with a different kind of respect. The workshop became a community hub. People from outside came to see it. Students, journalists, even foreigners showed up to witness the magic of the scrap toys. But Elenice stayed true to her purpose. What we do here isn't art to be shown off. It's love to be taught. And from time to time, she'd look at her children and see in them everything she had hoped for. Joy, dignity, and pride. Not for having much, but for knowing that with little, they could do anything. That Christmas, she decided to repeat the gesture that had started her whole story. She made a special gift for each child, but this time, with something extra. Inside each toy, there was a small handwritten note. To Julia, she wrote, "Daughter, when you fainted, I nearly broke. But today you are strong, steady. Never doubt the incredible woman you already are." To Vinicius, "Son, your robot opened doors. Never be ashamed of your roots. They helped you grow toward the sky." To the twins, "My boys, you are joy in the form of noise. Keep flying high, like the kites we made together." And that day, everyone cried, but it was a different kind of crying. The kind that knows it was all worth it. Elenice never got rich, never had a car, never bought a big house, but she turned what she had into something bigger than any fortune. She left a legacy, and every time she saw a child running down the street with a toy made with love and creativity, her heart warmed. She wasn't just the woman who made toys from scrap. She was the brave mother who taught the world that joy, when it's real, can be born even from what others throw away. If this story touched your heart like it touched ours, take a moment and subscribe to the channel. Each story we share here is a tribute to brave mothers who, even through the hardest struggles, never stop loving with everything they have. Leave a like. Share this video with someone who needs to believe again in the power of a mother's love. And if you know a story like this, drop it in the comments. Let's spread more empathy, more hope, and more humanity together. You are part of this chain of love.